I'm very detail oriented.
Uh-huh.
So that I have to be careful because, what's interesting is that I've worked with some authors, they're interested in knowing some of the details. It's like, well, what's involved with copyright?
Okay, okay.
Because that's one huge, there's a lot of the questions and questions and listening. So often it's beginning with a very simple question of what is your goal as an author? Because that can also determine what direction that you want to take, because there are two directions. You can go with traditional publication, and depending on the extent that you want to go with, you have, if you want to go to a major publisher, you're going to need an agent. And that starts that's a whole nother kinds of track, which I won't get in here. Or you can decide that you want to self-publish. If you are a business owner and you want to be able to keep the rights to all your product, to your asset, to the books that you're going to write, book or books, you may choose to go ahead and self-publish, because then you keep in track of that. So a lot of it is just starting to have conversation, because what ends up happening, I start asking you questions, things like, what are your goals? And is this going to be one book that you want to do, or do you want to be a multi-book author? And the reality is that if you are in business in any capacity, you need to be more than a one-book author, because within 5 years, your book is old.
I agree. What about series?
Series. As a matter of fact, that's what, the nonprofit that I've been talking to, they're looking at, multiple series of books, all built on, what I always term is what's called the anchor book.
Or is this a regular size book if it's a series?
Book lengths can depend. And again, it goes back to these first questions. What are your goals? Who are your audience? What is the purpose of your books? What kind of book format do you want to do? Do you want to do a blend of research and just narrative? Or do you want to have Q&A? Or do you want to have interviews based on it? So there are a lot of these preliminary questions that help kind of direct you to the decision that you finally want to say, yeah, I want to self-publish, or I want to do traditional. So yeah, I mean, there's too much to really get into here, but
okay,
there are a lot of to answer your question specifically though, with series books, the length of the book that you want is going to be subjective, because it's going to be depending on what you want your messaging to be and who your audience is. So for example, if you're going to want to do print books, for example, you can choose to say, well, I've worked with some authors that said, I don't want the book too long. So they opt to do about 160 pages. Okay. And that's that might be termed a shorter book. Yes. A longer book or traditional type book is probably in the 200s, 250 and above.
Okay.
So those might be, if you were to look at some of my books back here, you see the ones that are a little bit thicker and they're getting 200s or so.
Yes, I do.
But if you're going to be doing a long series and taking very niche topics on a whole bunch of things, think about, the Cliff Note books or things like that, where they're very small and they zero in on a very specific subject. And you say, well, I'd like to do 20 books. I've brainstormed and I've got 20 topics under my main topic. I would like to be able to do all these little ones. And so when it's all done, you've got all these books and it may be out to, 5,000 pages or whatever it might be. But it's all these individual books. And for your reader, if that's what they want, they'll say, ooh, I'd like to find out more about this subject. And so they're able to take that off without having to buy the whole book. It's kind of like the old days of albums with the musicians, where you buy an album and you don't just have the, the top one that they're pushing across on the radio. You have all of them. It's not like that.
Are the series sold in a collection? I've seen some authors sell like that in a collection.
Yeah, and of course, my niche is nonfiction, but certainly if writers are listening right now and they are fiction writers,
Yes.
um, big benefits in doing series. And I could go on and on about the many different authors that are out there that do book series.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and the
Okay.
series can be in multiples. So I've seen in the fiction world with some well-known writers where they'll go and they'll follow a saga of a family, and they'll have book one, book two, book three, and then that's in that series. And then you start another series and there's maybe 3 books in that or whatever. Or there are others that, you know, J.K. Rowling, most well-known author out there with her Harry Potter books. I mean, she did multiples of her story too. And those are long books. So when I talk about the short books in the series with 160 pages and so forth, I'm specifically referencing nonfiction.
Nonfiction. The
Nonfiction.
nonfiction.
But,
Uh-huh.
yeah, but to be honest with you, there are other opportunities now for authors that are nonfiction that
Okay.
do shorter ones, and Amazon is certainly makes that available, and they have a new product, if you will, but that you can do where you can do very short stories. I just saw that coming through my Facebook feed on that. So for anybody listening to this, if you are a fiction writer and when maybe want to tip your toe in there, and it's all digital. It's like an ebook. It's all digital.
Okay.
So the area of authorship is just ginormous. So it all comes down. So